Welcome back to the War Room, my beautiful people and fight fans from all around the world. We are here today to give you the update on the IBA Congress. That was just what Eddie calls a debacle because it was a mess. It is still a mess. And we kind of want to touch base a little bit on the response from USA Boxing, the CEO, Mr. Bob McAtee. And then, of course, we're going to kick it off to my sister, Malissa Smith. She is a women's boxing historian, and we're going to give you guys an update on women's boxing. But first, let's go right to Eddie because this is the hot breaking news today. What do you got, Eddie?
Yeah, the IBA Congress, Extraordinary Congress, they called it on September 25th, was more proof that you can't understand what's going on in boxing and combat sports and sports in general without a good understanding of the world situation, of world politics, beyond just what's going on in the sports arena, who's winning and who's losing, and that sort of thing. What you saw, I called it a debacle. By the way, a friend of mine used that word in a text to me like a day or two before. So I said, it's a good word to use for this. What went on basically was IBA is just like their pals Putin. They're losing, they're getting desperate, they're getting isolated, and so they lash out and they try to get more aggressive in that situation. The stuff that went on the Congress has been gone over many, many times, not so much in the American boxing media, which thinks the world is flat beyond the borders of the United States and you fall off the edge of the earth if you deal with it. But a lot of the Irish and the British and a lot of the media there, the general media and the boxing media have talked about this. They had to hold this because a couple of months ago, I think it was in May, when they had their election for president, they illegally disqualified Boris Vandervorst from running against the current president, Umar Kremlev, on specious grounds. That was overturned by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So what they said, they're going to have another one to decide if they'd have a new vote. And most people thought they'd have another vote. And frankly, if they held it, because Kremlin has been running around all over the Middle East and Africa and a lot of places, throwing a lot of money around, opening academies, providing equipment, doing all these types of things, he would have gotten enough votes because it's one federation, one vote. It's not based on the strength of the federation. So the U.S. or England federations have one vote, just as the St. Lucia and Malawi do.
And how many federations are there, Eddie? You know?
I don't know the number, but I think there were like 150 something at the Congress. That number changed, by the way, because the power went out. Kremlev had said, let's hold it in Yerevan, Armenia, because of the great organization skills that they have. And what happens is about a half hour into the Congress, the power goes out for about an hour, and they said it was a faulty cable. This is in a pretty major building that's held professional and amateur boxing, international concerts. The Victor Chinian, I think, fought there. A lot has gone on there, and yet the power still went out. And when it came back, it wasn't that it apparently did not go out deliberately because they continued. The number of federations who were at Congress went up from 127 to 151 in that hour. And they said, oh, it was because people arrived late. And that included federations who were voting online through their Zoom link. But one federation that wasn't there was the Boxing Federation of Ukraine that the Russian-led IBA wouldn't let in. And this, again, is no coincidence that we're talking about Russia and Ukraine. And please follow what's going on as Ukraine fights to liberate itself from this terrible, illegal invasion by Putin, where the Russians are committing war crimes every single day. And they did it on the pretext of government interference in the work of the National Federation. And what really happened was that the IBA recognizes Volodymyr Protovus as the head of the Ukrainian Boxing Federation. And he was, quote, elected, and again, this is like a Putin-style election, in December 21, and they had a vote where they didn't have the required minimum number, a quorum of regions being present to participate. It was several short, but they held the vote anyway, and he was, quote, elected. And in Ukraine, the Ministry of Justice said, that we don't recognize that, and they recognized Kirilo Shevchenko as head of the federation. And they did this. So 2 days before the Congress, Kremlev's people suspends the Ukrainian Boxing Federation with no hearing, and this is supposed to be taken up by an IBA Congress. This is a violation of the IBA's own rules, but they did this anyway. So then they went on and they were going to vote whether to hold a vote. And instead of holding the vote, there was an overwhelming vote not to hold a new vote for president.
That is crazy.
And also something that isn't talked about, and I think is just almost as important, when they disqualified Vandervos, they also disqualified 5 of his people who were part of the Common Cause Alliance, the reformist group of many boxing federations, the U.S., England, Ireland, and many other countries. And they did not even schedule a new vote for the board of directors, which makes a lot of these types of decisions. So they finally held the vote, and it was overwhelmingly against holding a new election. 106 against the new election, just 36 in favor of it, and 4 abstentions. And the IOC was not happy at all, because this exposes just openly the undemocratic nature of IBA. And, you know, there's an undemocratic nature of the IOC in general, this self-appointed group. So they're not ones to brag about this, but this was just blatant. And they talked about disturbing developments. They talked about that there was no election, kicking out the Ukrainian Boxing Federation 2 days before the Congress, that what they call the chaotic circumstances of the voting procedure. And the IOC statement said, following these disturbing developments, the IOC Executive Board will have to review fully the situation at its next meeting. And this will be in early December. So it does not look good at all for the IBA, because already they've been stripped of the right to organize the boxing at the Paris 2024 Olympics. Boxing is not on the program for the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. And it looks like this is adding fuel to the arsenal of those people in the Olympic movement. They just want to get rid of boxing. They just want to be done with it completely. It's obviously one of the most dangerous, probably the most dangerous, bloody sport with the most deaths that go on. A lot of the people in the Olympic movement just don't like combat sports, violent sports. And now you have a situation where Russia has along with Belarus, is basically persona non grata in the Olympic movement. The IOC said athletes from those countries should not be allowed to participate in Olympic Federation events, or if they are, without their own flag or anthem, just as neutrals. And now you have Kremlev, who is an old, someone who's been in Putin's camp for a long period of time, saying, well, he said this after the Congress, well, we should allow everybody to compete under their own flag. Basically, he wants to bring back Russian boxers. And you should also understand who he is. that there's a lot of documentation, including in a new report on world corruption, which we'll mention at the end, that Kremlev had reportedly been, quote, a member of Putin's bikers, the Night Wolves, a nationalistic bunch of rockers, unquote, and he, quote, was involved with the Russian mafia gang in the 2000s. It looks like IBA is going to try to get some more money from somewhere else because it's unclear whether there's Gazprom, which is the Russian largely owned energy giant, that their sponsorship is probably going to end at the end of the year. And it's interesting that they working with the Saudi Arabian Boxing Federation, and one of the speakers who spoke remotely in English, the Congress had 5 languages: English, French, Spanish, Russian, and Arabic. Abdullah Al-Harbi, who we've mentioned before, spoke and was just very enthusiastic about not holding a new election. And he was someone we mentioned during the Usyk-Joshua rematch, because he was representing the Saudi Arabian Boxing Federation in that event. And there are pictures of him at the press conference just when they had some of the face-offs between Usyk and Joshua with Al-Harbi and Eddie Hearn. So it does not look good at all for the IBA and Olympic boxing. What happens next? There are a lot of different things that might happen. And one thing that also has emerged is that USA Boxing put out a whole response to these articles that were on the Inside the Games website that were basically reported a lot of this stuff, and then said at the end, I think they've had 3 so far, well, look, Kremlev got these overwhelming amount of votes. Maybe the IOC should deal with him. Maybe there's a lot of support for him, so bring him back, give him a chance, and all this stuff. And USA Boxing put out a long letter that refuted what Inside the Games writers said point by point, and then pointed out something very, very interesting. And I'll just say that this letter was sent out by a press release to the boxing media, and I know the publicist that I got it from, Bob Trieger, has everybody's name on this list, and wow, he's been around for many, many years. And I only found one website that even mentioned this, let alone publishing it, and it looked like one of these aggregated sites that just posts everything. And I'm just going to read this about what they call the relationship between Inside the Games and Umar Kremlev. And they write, and you could check this out on the link, that the public documents indicate that Inside the Games has an undisclosed business relationship with Umar Kremlev, which has resulted in the placement of Kremlev's associates on Inside the Games board of directors. And they mentioned Zana Abdullahian, former head of international relations of the Russian Boxing Federation, and Maxim Kotkov, head of a regional boxing federation in Russia.
Wow.
And then they give a link, and there are other links. You could just Google this. And they also go, from the public sources, it also appears that Vox Europe Investment Holding LLC, a Hungarian company, is a majority stakeholder of Inside the Games, which is in turn owned by FT Taxopark, a taxi leasing company registered in Russia.
Listen company. To this. A taxi company owns Inside the Game.
That that's FT crazy. Taxopark was owned by Kremlev personally in 2021 when the deal with Inside the Games was concluded. That's when Inside the Games was bought.
Oh,
current business records show that FT Taxopark's directors, stockholders include Maxim Kotkov. And you could also look up, it's also listed that Kotkov is currently the CEO of this FT Taxopark, also head of a regional boxing federation in Russia, and according to USA Boxing, on the Inside the Games board of directors. So all of a sudden, these articles appear on Inside the Games saying, give Kremlev a chance. He's really not that bad. He has a lot of support, all this type of stuff. And this is followed by the so-called boxing media with silence. I didn't even see an acknowledgement of this article on Boxing Scene, which is part of Paramount, CBS, on ESPN, which of course, it's hooked up with Top Rank, on Ring Magazine, which is owned by Oscar De La Hoya's people. Anywhere, any of these other sites didn't even mention this controversy and even say, we've asked Inside the Games. They'd have to say this. We'd have to ask Inside the Games for comment or whatever. And only this one kind of weird aggregator site that got the press release and just slapped it up there. And we're mentioning it. So this is a situation that we're facing. And it looks like we're heading to a day of reckoning, because the IBA has really intensified its battle with the IOC. And the question is the IOC going to blink, which looks kind of unlikely? They are looking for a way to get Russian athletes back in the Olympic movement, and they came up with an unwieldy, really impossible plan that Thomas Bach said at a recent in media reports. We want to have Russian athletes who are against the war participate. Well, there's a real problem with that, because it's illegal in Russia to come out against the war, even though tens of thousands of people are fleeing Russia since they started this draft, which they're calling a mobilization. There were pictures of these miles-long lines of cars leaving Russia for neighboring countries, because they know what this draft means. They're going to send these young men, apparently they're only drafting men, to the front lines, untrained, unprepared, and use them as cannon fodder in their horrible illegal war in Ukraine. And people just want to get the hell out of there. But to openly oppose this is a crime, and you could get a severe jail sentence. So how can athletes do this? It seems that the IOC, there may be people in the IOC who really want to cave. So where this all heads, it's not heading anywhere good. It could lead to a split. Kremlev talked about, we shouldn't say Olympic boxing, we should say IBA boxing, and England boxing and others, and Van der Vost have been talking about, well, we want to get back in the Olympics with or without IBA. So there just could be a rupture, but it would take a long time to create another international federation with enough affiliates around the world to be considered by the IOC. And they just might throw their hands up and say, we don't need this sport anymore. So we'll see where this goes. But as I wrote also, it's a story that does not look like it's going to have a happy ending. So
no, and within the number of organizations that voted even against going to election, it does not bode well for putting together an alternative organization, because who would support it? And the fact is that any Olympic team has quotas and has folks joining those teams that from all over the world. There are only a limited number of seats or places available to box. But the thing with all of this, what nobody's talking about is how devastating this will be to the young men and young women who are already on their national teams, are gearing up for the Olympics in 24, want to be able to, or younger people who are in the JOs now who have their eyes on 2028. Not a care or concern for any of those people. And the fact that this will absolutely devastate women's boxing. Because
Absolutely.
if we look at where we have come from 2012 to today in this 10-year period of time, from
It's
when the
because of
Olympics,
Olympic boxing.
it
Yeah.
is because of Olympic boxing, and anyone you talk to will tell you the exact same thing. It is absolutely because of that. And there is state money, federal, there is money being invested in these programs across the world or amateurs precisely because of the fact that there's an opportunity to win Olympics. Sure, how great to win, international titles. It does not have the cachet of the Olympics. And for women in boxing in particular, this is particularly devastating.
Right.
In that I find it absolutely shameful that there is not one word of what this will do to the athletes. This is all about money and politics and nothing about the athletes themselves. Absolutely shameful.
Truly is. But speaking of women's boxing, let's talk about. I think there were some good fights on. I watched some women's Muay Thai
I
stuff
mean,
this weekend.
the big thing to talk about is Jackie Nava, Jackie La Princesa Azteca Nava, who is 42 years old.
Wow.
She started fighting when she was 21 years old. So half of her life, she
Wow.
has been a boxer. She ended her career on October 1st, on the night of October 1st, in a 10-rounder and against a very credible opponent, Gloria Elena Yancaqueo. I'm sorry if I've destroyed that name. My apologies.
Right, we're terrible at names.
Through, got the UD win and came and said, and that was her swan song. That was her last fight. She ends her career 44-4.
Wow. So she retired on that note.
She retired. That was her last fight.
All right.
It was held in Tijuana, where she has done a lot of her fights in the past. And you want to talk about a career of a person that deserves to be on the first ballot of the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
Right.
Jackie Nava exemplifies that. She's a superb athlete. And P.S., she's a congresswoman in Mexico.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So, this is an extraordinary woman. We tip our hat. She's been an inspiration to women in Mexico, in Argentina, all over the world who have known of her career. And she has fought the best of the best fighters such as Mariana Juarez, Barbie Juarez. They had a really amazing rivalry between them when they have had their fights. This is all at super bantamweight. She has fought Marcela Eliana Acuna. She's fought American fighters like Alicia Ashley. I mean, she's been fighting for 21 years, right? So she was a little teeny tiny baby when she started in 2001 and actually had her first fight in the United States in Honolulu. Nice. So she's really extraordinary, and we really have to salute her. And yes, there were other great fights, mostly in Mexico, and there was a great fight in Uruguay. There was a fight in Mexico, fights in Argentina. So, but what we have to look forward to are some, of course, we have our giant card on October 15th. That's just 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks away now, with with Claressa Shields and Michaela Meyer at the head of that card. We can fully expect that boxing Twitter will be
on fire
by next week when we get into all the media stuff and everything else. But there's other boxing going on. UK this weekend on the 6th is, I'm sorry, on the 7th is going to have a female card, a female main event.
Where? Who? What? When?
A woman named Lauren Parker fighting Esmeralda Guyana for just a baby belt, but it's main event people in UK.
Wow.
We're going to have Ellie Scottney is going to be back in the ring on Saturday the 8th. Shannon Courtney is going to have a fight. So we have, and even Showtime on the 8th is going to have a female bout. So About Time,
Stephen Espinoza.
Yeah, that's great. Gabriela Fondora is going to be fighting. So against Naomi Reyes. just, 10x2, not for a belt,
Right.
but that is great to see. So thank you, Showtime, for putting that on. I'm
Right
assuming this is
on.
not a PBC card because we know how that
'Cause
works.
we know how they are.
But that's really excellent. And our girl Heather Hardy is fighting. She is finally
Yay.
getting back in the ring. She's fighting on October 13th in a local show in New York City at the Sony Theater. Just a 6x2 with Calista Salgado, who in her last bout fought Melissa St. V about a month ago. So
Right.
a little bit of cannon fodder there, but
Right.
it's great for Heather to get back. She's 40. But here's the cool thing. It's being promoted by Boxing Insider, which is a New York-based group, and this is their first promotion.
Their
And-
promotions team, I thought Boxing Insider was a publishing company.
Yeah,
Well, they
yes,
are.
it is.
But they have just gotten their promotion license. Larry, who's the owner
Well,
of that.
all right, Larry.
So they are promoting this, and Heather is helping doing the promotion and the production.
What?
So this is something, that's really good for Heather. And, they've got Lou DiBella sitting on top, helping them,
Right.
sort of guiding
As their mentor. He's
as a
probably
guiding
an
mentor.
investor.
Exactly,
Right.
going, hey, this is great.
Yeah.
Because they want to bring Broadway boxing back to New York and really
Right.
kind of bring back that memento of club fights back into the
Right.
city. Part of the problem with boxing in New York City is New York State has really put in a lot of onerous insurance requirements and other things, in part because they're, to keep boxers safe, but it makes it harder for the smaller promoters to be able to put on shows. So there's a real desire to figure that out, but also to give an opportunity to local talent, whether it's amateurs turning pro or
Right.
pros who are, still out
Mhm.
here and still really viable as opponents.
I
So
love club shows.
I love club shows too. So
Yeah.
anybody in hearing, it's going to be at the Sony Hall in New York City on 42nd Street, and there's still some tickets available. So you might want to do that. And if you want to do Heather a solid, give a call over to Gleason's Gym and buy it through her. So,
All right,
she
there
gets
you go.
she gets that. Cause
You'll get
look,
that
doesn't
commission.
matter how big commission, hell, it doesn't matter how big you are. If you're a woman in boxing, you got to put
Right.
fannies in the seats.
That's
Don't
right.
kid yourself. You have tickets that have to be sold.
That's right.
So that's what's happening. Anyway, so as I said, just get ready for a really huge week starting to ramp up with a lot of excitement for Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall, Michaela Mayer and Alicia Baumgartner,
Right.
and some fighters like Caroline Dubois, who's a British fighter, came in with a strong amateur record. We'll see how she's doing. Ebony Jones is going to fight Shannon Ryan. Our own Ginny Fuchs, who was captain of the 2020 or 2021 and 2016 Olympic boxing teams for the United States. And what's really cool is that Clarissa, Michaela, and Ginny were the team in 2016.
Yeah, I saw that photo.
There's some real excitement around that. And again, just saying, back to our earlier discussion, how important boxing, women's boxing, what the debt it owes to the opportunities it's had because of the Olympics. And we have to do all we can to save it and to give amateur opportunities to these women, whether it's in the United States or the United Kingdom and Ireland, which have active Olympic committees that are really committed to this, but all over the world, people, we really have to help them out.
Exactly. All right, folks. Well, look, you guys want to cover anything else before we sign off for today?
Yeah, one other thing, and this show will probably be up after this event is held, but with all the corruption in sports in the world, there's a movement against it to create some type of world anti-corruption agency similar to WADA, but would deal with corruption in sports in general. And the first of the events that's going to be discussing this, which I posted a link on Twitter. Hopefully, if you can't catch it live, it will be they'll put up the video of this is on Tuesday, October 4th, and it's called Fighting Corruption in Sports. There's a whole long report on this by one of the journalists that Grit Hartman wrote, and you could read all this stuff. All this stuff is online. They're having a number of speakers at this event, including Maximilian Klein of the German athletes group, Declan Hill, the investigative journalist and academic, who I had on a couple of years ago discussing the whole Kinahan situation, Jens Sire Anderson, the international director of Play the Game, Paulina Tomczyk of EU athletes, and a number of other speakers. And they want to create this internationally. So look this up. And again, if you can't make it live, or if this is past, this takes place afterwards, go try to check this out. They have a website, stopcorruptioninsports.eu, and the main force behind this, if you also want to look her up, is Viola von Krammen, who is a member of the European Parliament, representing the German Greens. And again, with all the discussion of Russia, if you're familiar with the U.S. Greens and their pro-Putin stance and all this, that's sort of an outlier in the Green movement. And the Greens are actually part of the German government, which is giving a lot of support to Ukraine, fighting to defend themselves against the Russian aggression. So there's a lot going on with this, and it'll take several years for this to come to fruition, to figure out who's going to do it, what to do, to get the finances down. But these are discussions that have to take place, because as I said before, you cannot deal with corruption in boxing and combat sports separate from that of corruption in other sports. And that can only be done internationally, because we're dealing with international sports. And this is the beginning of an international effort to do just that. So find a way to support it, follow it in one way or another. It's going to affect us all. And so check that out. Stopcorruptioninsports.eu.
Nice. We need the stopcorruptioninsports.USA also.
Well, that's what it's part of. I mean, Declan Hill, although he's Canadian, teaches about corruption and the fight against it at the University of New Haven in Connecticut. So there's a whole international aspect to this.
Right on. Well, we need more of that, please. Thank you very much. All right. So look, let's wrap this up, folks. All right, Eddie, tell the people where they can find you, my brother.
Yeah, well, I post a lot on Twitter at NHB News. You can go to my Patreon page, which is where I had the article on the IBA Congress being a debacle, at patreon.com/Eddie Goldman. Subscribe to that. Support independent journalism. We constantly expose the garbage and the lies and the obfuscations and the mainstream journalism. And this is journalism that's independent. So subscribe to it, and my website, eddiegoldman.com.
Right on. All right, Melissa, tell everybody where they can find you, baby.
Okay, well, on Twitter and Instagram, I am at girlboxingnow. My website is girlboxing.org. I really hope you can check it out. And hey, look, buy the book, History of Women's Boxing. You can find it on Amazon.
And check out her latest article on the BBC. Is that on the BBC News page?
No, it's on iNewspaper. Yeah, iNewspaper. Yeah.
I tried to boost you up there. Right.
Well, yeah, that'd be nice. But
right.
No,
You're getting there, baby. You're getting
iNews.com.
there. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, folks, you guys can hit me up on Twitter at Angry Afro Radio and on Instagram at Fight Goddess Fitness. You guys, thanks for tuning in. We're here talking about important stuff, okay? Important stuff. So please support, please follow, please support independent journalism, because my people over here are doing important work. All right, let's go. I'll see you guys the next time. Peace, love, and push.